What's the worst thing you've been wrongfully accused of? Stealing money from work. My register was over $100 short one day. My boss made me undo all of my pockets and went through my backpack. I had to take off my shoes and socks in front of him. He had me shake out my clothes in front of him. It wasn't like he made me take them off, but in the middle of the kitchen he starts yelling at me to shake out my shirt and my undies in front of the whole class. He wanted to see my car, but I insisted that I hadn't left the restaurant. It just sucked. I was humiliated. I'd worked there for years without a single incident. I wouldn't say I was friends with the boss, but we were certainly friendly and on great terms. I get that he needed to check everything out in case something happened, but throwing all of my stuff out of my purse onto the ground and yelling for me to shake out my clothes wasn't necessary. A former friend worked as a bar back at a family-owned pub, and money started disappearing during his shifts. The owner saw that on the days money went missing, he was the only one consistently scheduled. They approached him about the money and asked if he was having financial trouble. He denied taking the money. The owners were convinced that he was the thief and started treating him like crap, rescheduling him at the last minute, cutting his hours and giving him crap jobs. They complained about him to the other employees and to the regulars. They decided to put cameras behind the register to catch him in the act and told no one. The next time money went missing, they checked the footage only to find out that their daughter and her girlfriend were the ones stealing. They had the run of the pub, so seeing them come in on their days off wasn't unusual. They set him up. The messed up thing is they fired him anyway because they were embarrassed by all the crap talking they did and wanted to keep quiet about their daughter's theft. I was accused of mistreating a minor by a neighbor. I'd been babysitting my sister. I was 22 at the time, she was 3, and she was going through that silly phase most young children go through where they just want to run around in the buck all the time. My neighbor knocked on the door while I was cooking dinner. My sister streaked to the door and opened it before I could get there. The neighbor saw a buck-wild young kid and a grown man, assumed the worst, and called the cops and then called the other neighbors. The cops came out, talked to me, talked to my sister, called our mum and talked to her, talked to the neighbor. They realized nothing was going on and apologized for the inconvenience and left. Unfortunately, by then, the neighbor had spread the rumor throughout the apartment complex and people being people believed the worst. I became a pariah in that neighborhood. Over the next few weeks, the rumor spread throughout the town. It ended up making my life hell there, and I had to move to a different county to leave the rumors behind. I know a lot of parents with kids who seem to go through this stage. It's generally treated more with amusement than concern, but it can make for some awkward situations when your toddler decides it's time for a public display. Doesn't usually go this badly, though. Another story with similar wild accusations to follow. I was essentially accused of inappropriate behavior as a pre-kindergarten teacher. They always questioned me if I'd have to be in the room with the children alone. I was the opener, so I had 5 to 10 kids in the mornings before anyone else got there, even though it was literally part of my job. Parents would subtly try to ask me this kind of stuff or accuse, "You're the only one here in the mornings. Shouldn't there be a woman with you?" Just stuff like this says they don't trust me with their children. Not as bad as some people here, but it still hurts when all I wanted to do was teach children and help them learn. That's why, as a male, I'd never get into any kind of child-related care where I was the only one with them. I remember when I used to play ball at the park with my dog. I'd bring a bucket of balls and a bat and hit them off for him to retrieve. One day, a kid, about 7 or 8, comes over and asks to play with us. Me, being the friendly guy I am, says sure and hit him some ground balls. Next thing I know, this lady, his mom I'm sure, comes running over screaming at me about stealing her child or something. I was so embarrassed and it made me assess situations so that I won't be alone with any children, because apparently all guys out alone are sick freaks. On Christmas Eve, I was accused of stealing a customer's credit card after I left work for the night. It felt horrible for my team to have to deal with that on Christmas Eve of all days. The lady had come in to return an item earlier in the day. It was one of our Christmas special items that we don't normally stock. I told her this as she was still undecided about returning it. She went out to talk to her husband who was sitting in the car outside. Eventually, she decided to return it. I processed the return like normal. I didn't touch her card at any time. She put her card through the FPOS terminal. I had her sign a receipt to say that she had returned the item. I gave her a return receipt which shows FPOS refund on it. And that was that. Later that night after I'd left, the husband came back. He was furious. The lady was with him, but she was quiet. He was yelling and throwing a massive tantrum, saying that the girl who served her, me, had stolen her credit card. He was demanding an apology from me or my team. Luckily, we have security cameras which face directly on the counter. They're very clear pictures. It was very, very obvious that the wife put her credit card back in her purse. Plus, a receipt will not be printed out if a card is still in the terminal, which meant she wouldn't have been able to sign anything if she had left it in there. The manager was not happy about him accusing me of this. He didn't get his apology. This reminds me of an incident involving myself a while back. I'd gone through a drive-thru, ordered food, and paid. I was on autopilot at the time. I received my drinks through the window and couldn't figure out where my credit card went. I informed the girl in the window and she checked her workspace while I dug through my car. She apologized for the incident and the manager gave me a card with her name and number to reach them if I couldn't find my card. Well, I stopped in the parking lot for a bit, searched some more, and decided to head home. On the drive home, I got a call from a man that told me he had reviewed their security camera and she had given me my card back. Before I could thank him for checking, he insisted the clerk did not steal the credit card. I never made that claim, and it surprised me how defensive he was over the issue. He told me I could come to review the footage myself at a later date if I didn't believe him. When I got home, I went through the sides of the seats, under the seats, etc. until I did find my card. What happened is, when she handed me the drinks, she stuck my card between them, and the card fell down the side of the center console. I didn't realize this at the time. I called them back to let them know I found my card just because of the potential drama I'd caused, even though I was calm and unaccusingly polite throughout the ordeal. It was pretty silly to begin with. I realize now this might happen more often than I'd think, and people are stupid and easy to accuse. Stabbing a kid with a pair of scissors. I tried to explain the kid was bullying and attempted to steal my scissors but cut himself on them in the process. Got suspended by the principal anyway because the school didn't want to take sides. I was 18 and home for my lunch break one day when 3 detectives showed up at my door. Apparently, our IP address had been used to post illegal material containing children to a website. Not knowing my rights adequately at the time, I let the cops in and let them inspect my computer. They found LimeWire on it and decided I was a suspect. By this time, I'd called both of my parents at least 10 times, but neither were picking up. I let them take my computer so they could have the lab do a more thorough inspection of my hard drive. Expectedly, they found nothing and either decided not to or were unable to get a warrant for the rest of the computers and digital storage devices in the house. The worst thing about the whole ordeal was my parents asking me repeatedly over the next week if I did it, and if I did, they'd get me help. That freaking hurt. I'm already freaking the frick out about cops taking my computer and digging through it, and now my parents think I'm guilty. They didn't seem to accept that I didn't do anything wrong until we got my computer back and we were no longer being investigated. My plan after the fact was to not tell anyone about what happened, because nobody needs to know that the cops came knocking on my door looking for someone distributing that kind of material. My dad decided to tell any of my friends who came over about what happened as a warning about security. Our Wi-Fi was unsecured until after this incident. Being 18-year-old dudes, they made it a running joke that I was into that stuff. They're still my friends because I know they weren't trying to actually be jerks, but those jokes still hurt. They actually mostly stopped after a couple of months, and I think the last time I heard one of them mention it was 2 years after the fact, 4 years ago. Oosh, I mean, there's a lot of accusations in this group about misbehavior with young people. I guess it's a good thing that people take the issues so seriously, but it looks like it can really wreck your life if untrue accusations come your way. My mum accused me of eating her candy bar when I was 8, even though my sister ate it. My sister was 10 and wouldn't fess up, so we had to stand in a corner for 6 hours until my dad came home and I started bawling and my sister finally told him she ate it. He yelled at my mum for punishing me. Love you, Dad. 6 hours for a candy bar? Jesus Christ. Yeah, my mum is serious about her chocolate, and she's a witch. My wife was arrested while out shopping with our 3-month-old. As she walked into the store, a girl who was exiting offered her a shopping cart. My wife accepted and went about her business. A few minutes later, the girl found her in the store and asked if she'd left her, the girl's, wallet in the cart. My wife said no and figured that was the end of it. Evidently after that, the girl went to store security who let her watch all the recorded security video and they saw my wife tucking something into her diaper bag right after accepting the cart. It was her phone, by the way. The girl ran back across the store, screaming at my wife, "I know you did it! They have it on camera! I called the cops!" etc. So my wife keeps trying to de-escalate the situation, but the girl's having none of it. Then the store's customer service desk, where they ended up to discuss things, holds up the girl's wallet. "Is this yours?" The girl grabs it and confirms it's hers and departs without an apology. Then the cops show up and in their opinion, my wife stole the wallet and hid it in the store where someone else picked it up and turned it in. So they arrest her for felony theft. After trying to force her at length to confess, threatening our child, swearing at her, among other things, eventually she pulled out her camera to record them and that's when they shut up, cuffed her and charged her. It took us several months and a hefty lawyer fee to get access to the security video, which the cops weren't required to turn over to us until the day of her hearing. But once we had it, it only took 20 minutes to prove exactly what did happen with the wallet. It was dropped by the girl before she even offered the cart. Another customer picked it up and brought it to customer service before my wife even entered the store. 5 months, $3,500 later, the DA called it a case of mistaken identity and dropped charges. During that time, my wife couldn't apply for jobs. She's a mental health counselor and it would have shown up in her background check, and had to take several days away from our very young child, including being detained for over 4 hours for the arrest itself. No apology from the DA, the cops, the store, or the girl. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 18 years old, my cousin came over one day and brought me truck parts that he said he'd brought for my birthday and they'd finally arrived. I thanked him wholeheartedly because it must have been almost $1,000 in parts and I really needed them. I installed them all into my truck and went on my merry way. Fast forward about a month later and I'm cleaning my truck and 2 police cars roll up to my house. They read me my rights and explain to me that my cousin told them that I told him to steal a credit card and buy me truck parts, which is a screwing load of nonsense. I told them that I had no part involved with it, and that should be the end of it. But still, I did receive stolen products and still had to go to court for it. My cousin got a slap on the wrist and community service because he was 17, but since I was an adult, I had to be charged. I was able to get it down to only a misdemeanor and no jail time, again, all while I never did a single fricking thing. Dealt with it on my record for about 2 years and was able to get it expunged. F the American justice system. I was able to forgive him because I know we all make mistakes, but what really killed me is that his mother, my aunt, said I was a bad influence on him and I deserved it. That hurt me the most. The school district was hit by a virus. I think it was ransomware, although that doesn't match up chronologically, back in late 2007. Once they cleaned up the mess, they traced it back to someone with a flash drive in our computer lab, during the period our class was using them. My 5th grade teacher, who had it in for me, ranted me out in front of the class regarding my utter stupidity and carelessness. That hurt, although she'd done it before and would do it again. I wasn't to blame, however, as I'd lost my flash drive a couple of weeks before the virus incident, and ended up finding it a month or so in a small backpack pocket, completely soaking in a carton of soy milk I'd also forgotten. Oddly, no other consequences, which makes me think she was bullcrapping. I was accused of unwanted advances on a girl at a party at my university. I was drunk as heck that night, and so was my good friend who I was dancing with. This girl had a boyfriend who I knew of, so I wasn't even hitting on her, we were just drunk and dancing. Suddenly, one of the guards grabs me by the arm and kicks me out and tells me that one of the stage guards had called him due to me bothering this girl. I spoke to her the day after and she had no idea what they were talking about. The worst part about this was I actually knew the guy who kicked me out. He told me to go grab something to eat at McDonald's and come back in an hour or two, since I was really drunk, which I can own up to. I assume he knew me well enough to know I would never do what I was accused of, but it still ruined that night. Back when my school's Twitter started posting raunchy SpongeBob memes, my teacher accused me of hacking into the Twitter account and doing it myself. He probably thought so because I've done sorta similar things before, but not to that extent, and nothing that could be considered hacking. They eventually figured out that the student responsible for running the account mixed up the school's account and one of her personal ones. The narrator has said dozens of times throughout his life that adult images of SpongeBob are no laughing matter, and feels vindicated by the previous story. Think before you Photoshop off those square pants, people. I was accused of stealing a puppy. This'll be long. My boyfriend, now husband, and I were home one Friday afternoon when our dog started barking incessantly, which is unusual for him. I go outside and there's a Labrador puppy playing around in our front yard. No one is around. I've lost a dog before and know how that feels, so the first thing I do is put him on a leash and walk him around our neighborhood to see if we run into anyone looking for him. No dice. It's getting late in the day and I have to start getting ready for work. I tie him out in our front yard so if anyone's looking for him, they can spot him and then call the animal shelter to report him found. but I don't initially bring him in. In 2009, I lost a blue heeler. While frantically searching for him in multiple counties, I emailed a lady who I thought was the current director of a local animal shelter. She had since left the position and was very candid with me about the shady things that sometimes go down in animal shelters. I'd heard some stories about possibly unethical practices being carried out at my own county shelter, and took her advice to heart. So I was wary of dropping this puppy off at this shelter even though I'd since moved to a different county. My boyfriend was sick that weekend and was not in the mood to watch this 4-month-old puppy in our unpuppy-proofed house. I didn't want to take him to the shelter. I felt confident that we could find the puppy's family, but I was scheduled to work the next 3 days and had very little say in the matter, since I wouldn't be able to actually watch the puppy. My boyfriend drove him to the shelter that evening. He signed a paper relinquishing the pup, but didn't get a copy. The next Friday, I have a voicemail from the owner of the puppy saying that the shelter had given her my number. She wants to pick her puppy up. What in the heck? I call her back and tell her that I'd found her puppy and alerted them that he had been found and then taken in. She didn't believe me. Fast forward, she starts talking about legal action. She's accusing me of theft of her very expensive and well-bred Labrador. I didn't let on that I know labs and that she didn't have much of a pup from a conformation standpoint, but I digress, and not that it matters. I keep my cool. I've never so much as smoked a cigarette in my life, so I wasn't feeling very intimidated. So I'm at work again and I'm complaining to my coworkers about this predicament that I'm in. The shelter is acting like they've never heard from us. This woman filed a police report against me. I show my coworker a picture that I'd taken of the puppy. Her friend adopted it 3 days after it was turned in. So now I found the puppy twice. I call the original owners and I'm like, look, this is weird and I don't care if you believe me, but I found your freaking puppy again. The shelter adopted him out way before the standard stray hold had expired and without being altered. I connect her to the new adoptive owner, who is crushed when he hears the backstory. The original owner goes to the shelter for answers about how this could have happened and decides to believe me when, due to the system being down, they can't show her any of the paperwork for the dog being relinquished or adopted out. She believes me now, but instead of all three of us, me, new owner, and old owner, going up there and exposing the lies once and for all, she wants to sue their butts off. She doesn't get her dog back for weeks because it's evidence or some crap, and I'm not supposed to confront the shelter until she says so. I have 2 lawyers in my family who say this suit won't go anywhere, and it doesn't, to my knowledge. I never got any closure. All I want for them is to look me in the eye and admit to throwing me under the bus. A day or 2 after the truth came out and the original dog owner had begun her crusade against the shelter, reporting them to the news, reporting them to the county commission, etc., the county dog warden creeped by my house at about 9 p.m. I'm instantly suspicious. Next night, same thing, but my dog and I are out for a walk on my street. The next morning I get a knock on my door from an official-looking man asking if the dog in the yard is mine. Apparently a dog that looked like him bit someone, but this guy is so nervous and he's stuttering that he can barely get the words out. I look him in the eye and tell him that my dog is never loose or out of my sight and to get off my porch. He said my dog matched the description they had. Well, the interesting thing is that my next-door neighbor has the exact same breed, same color, and everything. Do you think they asked her if her dog had bit anyone? Negative. Same investigation. I'm glad I told him to get lost. After that, I took my dog for a vacation at my dad's farm. I'm convinced the shelter wanted some petty revenge. This was 4 years ago, but screw you, Dana and Mike. In 3rd grade, there was this one kid and we hated each other. One day, I get accused of calling him the N-word during recess. The only problem was I was on the other side of the playground from him. Come lunchtime, the teacher pulls me aside and starts scolding me and demanding that I apologize to him for calling him that. I refused to because I didn't, and I didn't even see him all day. She then gets on me for claiming he was lying, and it's wrong to accuse someone of lying, and that I had to apologize for both now. I refused and said I didn't say anything, and I refused to apologize for something I didn't do. Finally, she says if I didn't do it, to just apologize for it. I replied saying that if I apologized for doing something I didn't do, then it would look like I actually did it and be wrong. I refused, stood my ground, and got a week of lunchtime detention. Totally worth it. That sucks, although I'll be the first to admit that I'd have no idea what to do in a situation like that where you have no proof one way or the other as to who said what. I'm glad I'm not a teacher. Not sure which of my bad luck Brian stories to share here, so let's go with one of my personal favorites that had the biggest risk of jail time. It was about 10 to 15 years ago, and I'd recently graduated college and finally had the money to go and drink. Friends and I would go out and listen to cover bands and drink and have a good old time. However, because we weren't stupid, we would auto-rotate through the designated driver through the night. This night, it was my time to be said driver. I picked up the guys and we all go downtown and get into the parking garage. It's one of those take a ticket, gate opens, pay before you leave situations. We're at the bar having a good old time, drinks are had, well, not by me, and many advances on women are rejected and we call it a night. Get to the car and go back to the gate and put in the ticket. Ticket spits back out, put in the ticket, ticket spits back out. I look over the ticket and it appears to be in working order, no major fold on said ticket and everything looks fine. I try this 4 or 5 more times before pressing the call button, but this just rings a phone and nothing happens. At this juncture, I'm livid. I just want to get the heck home. And this is a time before Uber and a town where taxi service is craptastic at best. Sure, I could walk 5 miles home, but I don't want to, so I try the ticket again. Finally, Chris has had enough. He gets out of my car and starts screaming obscenities till he's red in the face. He goes to the gate and just lifts it up. You can hear it break. At this point, nothing I can do but just drive on home. Well, those garages have cameras. Those cameras look at the license plates, and those license plates tie back to your name. So imagine my shock when I get a call from the police department the next day saying they want to question me regarding property damage in excess of some crazy number. Well, in the end, Chris admitted he did it. He had to pay for the repairs and do some community service. But man, that sucked. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.